I'm Sau-Wan Lai, BNI Chartered Surveyors, and today I want to talk about you guys. So, how many people are actually in a business space, office, shop? If you can raise your hands. Lovely. So, when you've made that decision to have a business space, that's not the end of your kind of decision making. And people who aren't in business spaces, I pose the question, do I need business space? And then the follow-up would be, if you do, how do I go about it? So, what I wanted to do was kind of talk about, I always talk about properties, but actually it needs to be a question of, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So here today, rather than just presenting something, I'm just going to give you kind of food for thought, kind of ideas of whether you want to need business space, and then how to go about getting business space. So it'd be kind of overview of what the type of business you are, the customers, and the potential costs. So we all are in an era where it's post-pandemic and there's a lot more flexibility around work. There's a lot more creations of like co-working spaces or even remote working and working from home. So there's no longer just a straight kind of, I have a business, therefore I need business space. We are, ironically, we are commercial property advisors, but we don't have our own businesses. We work from home. We made that decision because either we would go to someone's business spaces to discuss their needs, or the idea was to meet kind of in kind of coffee shops and be a bit more informal. So if you look at your own business, what type of business you are? Are you kind of customer facing, or are you more kind of behind the scenes? You don't need to have someone pop into your premises to see you. For example, Di wouldn't make a very good virtual chiropractor. She needs a physical place for her patients to come and see her. Whereas Ali probably doesn't need physical space, so he would be able to work remotely or attend his clients in their kind of work environment. So, you don't need someone to pop in. Why waste the money renting somewhere? Because I'm sure David would know, after staff, renting a property is probably the next most expensive thing for your business. So you need to examine your business, whether you need a prime location, whether you can exist kind of behind the scenes, whether maybe in a secondary location. For example, if you were a high street retailer, you want to have presence on the high street because you're selling goods that you prefer people who, a busy location for people to just pop in. Or if you're not, and you just need a quiet place for doing your business, for example, maybe e-commerce, you don't need a physical shop. You'd be much better off in a cheaper place, which is often dictated by location and visibility. So then your next question would be, what kind of customers do you serve? So for example, Richard at Jones and Young HQ, they have their business premises, they've got a bit of high street frontage, but a lot of their work might be just via telephone. They don't necessarily need someone just to come into their office. Or whether you have kind of customers that need kind of a physical presence, they need to pop in and see you. Maybe Will has people who he needs to see all the time, so he might want to have a meeting space, and obviously the co-working at the moment works really well. But then you might think, actually I need to expand a bit, or I need a bit more presence, and then you can kind of think about your options. So the customers will also dictate where you need to be. And then also, if you're thinking of costs, you need a space, you know your customers, and so you think, actually, I don't know how much it is to rent property, so you need to think about whether you need to pay business rates. So if you're kind of not unfamiliar with business rates, that's a property tax on an occupier in the premises, a bit like your council tax. If you're living somewhere, you pay council tax. For business, you pay business rates. But what people don't always know is business rates are, there's a point where there's no business rates you pay if you're a small business and it's your only premises. If it's under £12,000, you pay zero for the year. And also, it's called a rateable value. You see something that's £12,000 rateable value. What you actually pay is about, we say 50%, because it's calculated on a rate that changes, and it's never £12,000. We say maybe say £6,000, if that's what it says. And you need to consider on the type of property. The other costs are occupational costs, so you need your utilities as anywhere you occupy, insurance for your your premises itself, and the building. Sometimes the landlord covers that. And also, one thing to consider is repairs. If you take on commercial property, unlike residential property, sometimes the repairing obligations fall to you. So you want to take on a building, you want to also make sure that it's not going to be expensive to keep in repair. If you come to somewhere and the window's already a bit shoddy, then you either ask the landlord to do the works or kind of factor in potential future costs. So repairs is something that's often trips people up, because they're used to renting perhaps residential properties where the landlord's responsible for pretty much everything. When you come to a commercial property, that can be where you're responsible for items. For example, there was an industrial unit where they let a property, the tenant took it on, and then a week later the boiler broke. Unfortunately for the tenant, he was responsible for putting it back into repair, and he didn't realise that was his responsibility. So things like that can kind of play a factor in kind of your decision making, kind of cash flow and your planning. And then, so you decide you want a property. How do you go about finding one? A lot of people don't realise that Rightmove also have a commercial arm as well. That came in probably 10-15 years ago, when Rightmove was really popular for residential, and then they decided to go into the commercial sector as well, and it's where people go as well now, and it's really kind of, the model's a bit different to the residential way for agents, but a lot of agents do put their properties on there. But also just, if you know where you want to be, walk the streets. If you find an empty property, you can always ask the neighbouring properties if they know who the owner is, or drop in a note through the door, or look for boards. So we market properties, and we always say to the landlords, just being online sometimes isn't enough. You need to put something physically on the building so that people know it's available. But also don't be afraid to speak about what you want to do, and speak to your friends and your colleagues, saying, oh, I'm thinking of renting a place. And then in conversation, they might say, actually, my Aunt Joan owns a property. She's looking for a tenant. Putting yourself out there, but being not afraid to kind of share your ideas, because some properties are sometimes not advertised, and so you never know, they don't always come onto the market. So these are the kind of things, just to kind of give you food for thought really, and whether you're planning to have premises, or whether you're in premises and maybe want to relocate at some point, whether you're expanding and contracting, things change, and these are kind of ideas that you might not think about or consider, but always kind of always have a chat with somebody like myself, or if you're taking on properties, also another expense might be a solicitor, but a professional advisor is always on your side. And you don't want to sign up to something and then realise you put yourself in a financially worse situation because you didn't seek the right advice. So this is what I do. I'm happy to help people with their commercial properties. We deal with things day in, day out, so I suppose what seems everyday to me might be unusual for you, and we always try and kind of signpost people, give them advice and pointers, and signpost them to people if they're moving. Britannia Reeves will be able to help them with their office moves and things like that. Or Lucy with tenants, we tell our landlords and our tenants, we know a broker who's able to provide great insurance. And so we are here to help, and this is kind of goes on to any questions really.